Now, making up 61.6% of the total population, Africa's rural areas are arguably the continent's overlooked space, says Ben Leo, CEO of Fraym and former Director for African Affairs at the White House. He joins me now via Skype from Washington, D.C. to discuss what he describes as Africa's overlooked potential. Thank you, Ben, for taking the time out to join us today.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Now, you make a case for Africa's rural areas, and you say that they're an overlooked potential. Help us understand your perspective.
Well, the key point is the overwhelming attention is focused on Africa's burgeoning urban areas, and there are tremendous opportunities there. But a significant proportion of the population still lives in rural areas spread across the continent. And what people don't realize is consuming power, purchasing power is actually higher in many of these communities, many areas, than common wisdom would suggest, and indicating that there are a sizable opportunities that are not being pursued at this point in time.
You know, many times statistics, especially when countries here on the continent are looking at putting together statistics on the level of poverty, we always see higher numbers in the rural areas. Now, I know that you said that rural and poor are two different things. That rural doesn't mean poor, but I mean, that's what the numbers say.
Well, let's take one large country as an example. Let's take Nigeria. So there are about 95 million people living in rural areas across Nigeria, and about 60 million of those 95 million have enough purchasing power to own a mobile phone and durable goods like radios, fans, televisions, and they live in housing with advanced floors, finished roofs, or finished walls. All of those things suggest that there is enough purchasing power there for fast-moving consumer goods to own a bank account, as well as purchasing larger durables in the future. So this is where commonly held wisdom or anecdotes that rural equals poor is just simply not true. It is true in certain circumstances, but there are tens of millions of people that are in rural areas.
Now, Ben, for governments and corporates who are looking to better understand the numbers and the potential that these rural areas have, having adequate data is key. And I know that, and you have said that many decisions are still being taken on the continent without adequate data. And we're just, making, rounding up estimates and just guessing, a lot of guesswork going on. Help us understand how this is preventing corporates and governments from fully harnessing the potential of rural areas.
Yeah, traditionally, decision-making has been highly constrained by a lack of actionable data at localized levels, and organizations, companies have been forced to make decisions based upon anecdotes or gut feel. And at Fraym, we are changing that. We are transforming that. We are a geospatial data analytics company focused exclusively on Africa with continental coverage. And what we do is combine very high-quality geotag household survey data sets and combine that with satellite imagery and other geostatistical data sets to produce highly reliable estimates on what populations look like at localized levels, down to a 3-by-3 kilometer grid in rural areas, urban areas across the continent. And we're able to tell our customers, whether they're corporates or development agencies or NGOs for that matter, what the population looks like across hundreds of parameters.
Help us understand how wide your reach is.
Bringing light.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say it's bringing light to where the opportunities are and actually understanding where there are pockets of demand for particular products or services in a way that has not been possible in the past.
Help us understand how wide your reach is and what is setting your data apart from. I know that, it's not like there hasn't been any data at all, but it just hasn't been inadequate. How is your data standing apart from others?
Well, we started the company about 4 years ago out of frustration. We and my co-founders were working on a range of different commercial opportunities or policy issues across the continent, and we're very, very frustrated by the lack of actionable information. So we spent the last 4 years building the most powerful platform that's ever existed with continental coverage. There's actually only two countries where we don't have coverage right now. We're working to fix that. Those are Libya and Eritrea. Outside of that, we can tell you about populations at local levels across hundreds of different indicators. What are income levels? What are they spending on distinct product and service categories? Do they have access to services like power or improved water sources? And again, that's at localized levels. So companies, organizations are able to truly pinpoint where there are demand for their services. And not are able to get a relative ranking of the size of the prize and the opportunity, and then incorporate that into strategic expansion decisions, operational decisions, to lead to more effective outcomes through these decisions, and again across the continent. We're everywhere.
Okay, so tell us who's using this data now and how this is changing the game for corporates, development agencies who need these numbers, who need to have a clearer picture of what the numbers look like in the rural areas.
Yeah, so there's a broad range of customers that are using this kind of information and appreciate the fact that they now can have concrete data to inform their decisions. These are large multinationals. You think of fast-moving consumer goods companies that are trying to identify where there are pockets of latent demand. In this context, rural areas are often an untapped market. There are private equity and venture capitalist investors that are using us during their due diligence process, as well as helping their portfolio companies grow. Large development agencies like the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the UN Economic Commission for Africa are using us to build their strategies to engage with their partner governments to lead to improved service delivery, as well as a range of other kinds of clients that are using us to understand localized dynamics, whether it's from a security lens or other kinds of social lenses. So the application is very far-ranging, and that's is driven by a simple fact that everyone needs actionable data, whether it's finding their customers and figuring out how to reach them, or just understanding populations in terms of building and implementing projects to help deliver services. So data, actionable data, is something that we all need. And now with Fraym, we're able to provide that at localized levels and at a unit of analysis that matches organizations' decision-making. So it's very exciting in terms of the potential to transform decision-making across the continent.
Okay, Ben, help us understand how banks, the banking industry, is benefiting from this kind of data.
Yeah, so we do a lot of work with banking institutions across the continent, whether they are homegrown banks or multinationals that are operating in Africa. And there is a very strong push amongst nearly every single bank across the continent to shift from very expensive traditional brick and mortar or retail-based banking operations towards more decentralized, distributed, lower-cost options, whether it's digital banking using mobile phones, smartphones, or using agents that are spread across a country or a region to provide direct services to local populations. And as that shift has been happening, these banks need to know where there are the greatest concentrations of latent demand, where there's the greatest demand for their particular products and services. And at Fraym, that's what we're helping them do. We're figuring out where there are unbanked populations, but also that population demonstrates sufficient purchasing power, income levels, access to other services that would suggest that they are an ideal target for banking services. Whether that targeting is focused around where there are agricultural markets and you're going to have a concentration of rural population, farmers and otherwise, in a local setting at certain intervals throughout the week to work with them to open up bank accounts, or other kinds of models where you find concentrations of target customers. at Fraym, that's what we're doing. We're figuring out where those opportunities are and then working with our customers to figure out the best customized strategy for deploying on that and meeting their operational goals. And we're seeing really significant movement in this area, and it's a very exciting space. I mean, let's take Ethiopia, for example. A decade ago, there were only 2 million Ethiopians in rural areas that had a bank account, and that's increased sixfold over the last decade. Now there's 12 million that live in households that have a bank account, and when you think that, of the fact that there's over 40 million rural Ethiopians that have a mobile phone, and roughly 20 million that have enough purchasing power to buy durable assets, that means that there's significant upside for banking institutions in that market, as well as other markets, to be able to tap into this consuming class that has long been neglected.
Now, that's for the business side of things. What about for developmental purposes, for the government who need to provide basic amenities? They need to know how many people in the rural areas that they're dealing with. Is this the kind of data that they can also benefit from?
Absolutely. We do a lot of work in some of these areas as well, whether it's with development agencies or with African governments, to inform the strategy and their activities around extending services, whether it's power, where to extend the power grid, or alternatively, if there are areas that are more remote and the grid isn't going to get there in the next, say, 5-10 years, then working with those development agencies or governments to encourage off-grid power developers to move in there, whether they're providing mini-grid solutions or direct-to-consumer pay-as-you-go systems, as well as other public services, whether it's education or healthcare. All of these kinds of partners and organizations, governments, development agencies, or corporates, need to understand in a very granular way where services are being provided and where they need to go next, where they need to prioritize to move the needle on access to these life-changing services in the greatest way. So at Fraym, again, we will work with these kinds of partners at the strategy setting level. What does the macro picture look like? What is the high-order prioritization? And then actually work with them through the execution of operational activities.
Okay, Ben.
For instance, figuring out where the transmission or distribution grid should go next to meet the greatest number of people.
Okay, Ben, we'll just take a quick break and we'll come back and pick up from where we left off. I've been speaking to Ben Leo, CEO of Fraym and former director for African Affairs at the White House. As we continue our discussion on Africa's overlooked potential, still with me is Ben Leo, CEO of Fraym and former director for African Affairs at the White House. Ben, thank you so much for your time so far.
Thank you again.
We're still talking about data, and I know that many countries, Nigeria for example, have their own statistics office who try their best to collate data and give it and have the government and whoever needs it to plan ahead, especially from a policy perspective. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on effective data collection strategies that you think government or corporates can on their own begin to look into.
Well, the truth is that national statistics offices across the continent are actually are doing a pretty good job at collecting data. Hundreds of millions of dollars are spent every single year to implement very professional, robust household surveys, many of which are geotagged, so you're able to implement geospatial applications with that data. And so this is actually another one of those misnomers that that the continent is data poor in terms of production. There's actually very rich data sets. It's just the trick or the magic of what we do at Fraym is using those types of data sets as an input to be able to provide really valuable localized insights. But there's a whole range of other data streams that are quite exciting, whether they are mobile phone data called data records, which is particularly valuable for mobility, figuring out where people move throughout the day, transaction data, social media data. And when you bring all of those things together in a harmonized, seamless way, and particularly geospatially, you're able to really paint a complete picture, or a much more complete picture, of what populations look like, again, at super localized levels, to lead to improved decisions. But again, I would just say that the national statistics offices are, for the most part, very professional organizations that are toiling away and actually producing quite valuable data. It's just not being utilized in the way that it could, and that's one of the things at Fraym that we're changing.
Now, do you encounter any challenges in your data collection? I know you use sophisticated equipment to gather data, but help us understand the challenges that you have, if any.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's challenges. I think what we've learned over time is that there's a need for a really robust quality assurance process throughout the stage of our data generation, whether it's looking at about a dozen different things before we will incorporate a data set onto our platform. We'll look at sample frames, the periodicity of the data, a whole range of different things that will give us comfort that the data was collected in a reliable, robust way and is appropriate for some of our more advanced statistical techniques. And then we'll continue the quality assurance process as we transform and harmonize the data. So again, I wouldn't say that there's challenges, but there's a particular need to be very, very focused throughout the generation process on quality and reliability, and making sure that our customers are getting the best information possible, that they too can have confidence in using when making big decisions.
Okay, tell us about the work that you're doing with the African Development Bank. I know that your customers span a large range from FMCGs to development finance institutions. Tell us about what you do with the AFDB. Yeah, so the African Development Bank has launched a very refreshing and exciting initiative called 10,000 Communities. And it's focused on a slightly different demographic than we were talking about before. Earlier, I was mentioning that there are significant numbers of rural populations that have enough purchasing power to buy fast-moving consuming goods, or are ripe for a bank account or off-grid power systems. There's a lot of other communities that have been neglected for decades and under the status quo, are very, very likely to be neglected in the future. And this is what the African Development Bank's 10,000 Communities is focused on, is bringing customized solutions and commercially viable solutions to many of these vulnerable communities. And so we've worked very, very closely with them over the last year to quantitatively, apolitically identify these communities across about 20 countries, focused to start in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa and the Lake Chad Basin. And then once these communities are identified, figure out what access to electricity is, or safe drinking water, or access to other kinds of consumer goods. And then the African Development Bank is going to be working with a lot of partners, whether they're corporates, companies, NGOs, or others, to bring tailored solutions that are commercially viable, mass market products, down market, bottom pyramid products that these kind of communities can purchase and incorporate into their households or lifestyles to lead to improved results. So it's the first time that I know of that an organization working with their partner governments has really pursued hyper-targeting of the most vulnerable communities at scale. Obviously, it happens in individual communities at different times, but we're talking about 20 countries with 10,000 communities simultaneously, and helping to foster an commercially viable. It's quite exciting in that way, and we're very proud to be supporting the African Development Bank and its partners on this bold initiative. Speaking about results, what is the feedback that you're getting, especially from companies in the fast-moving consumer goods sector? I mean, if they're looking at bigger numbers, that would definitely translate to a bigger balance sheet bottom line for these companies. So what are they telling you? Yeah, so usually the first conversation is
focused on frustration with the lack of information as they're trying to figure out either which markets to expand to, new markets, or existing markets and tapping into new consumers that aren't purchasing their goods at this point in time. And then the second part of the conversation is usually one of astonishment, honestly, that actionable localized data is actually possible, it's available, and can be factored into their decisions. So we'll work very closely to figure out target customers for specific products, whether it's a soft drink or a mass market consumer good like toothpaste or toothbrushes or even diapers, and figuring out where there are these pockets of demand. And then again, working with them very closely to make sure that their distribution systems are set up to be able to deliver on this demand. So again, I think there's a lot of excitement that this kind of geospatial data, this kind of hyper-local data is actually available, it's reliable, and it can really transform how companies operate and make investment decisions on where to go next.
In terms of expansion and footprint, what do you have expansion plans? Are you looking to cover the entire continent?
Well, right now we're covering the entire continent. We have offices in Lagos, in Nairobi, and we're looking at opening other markets as well through a number of different coverage models. And we're getting a lot of demand in East Africa and West Africa, not just in say West Africa, not just in Nigeria, but also in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal. The East African community continues to see a lot of demand and growth, as well as Southern Africa. Naturally, we'll probably be looking at Joburg in the near future. But for now, our data and analytics coverage is continental. So we're servicing our customers in markets where we may not have a local presence, but we know the markets. We've worked there. All of us have been focused on the continent for the last 15, 20 years. And our network of advisors provide additional insights as well. So we can basically go anywhere right now, and our physical presence will invariably grow over time.
Okay, do you think that, having this localized, reliable data is motivation enough for, say, companies that are that have been thinking about Africa, trying to add Africa to their portfolio, coming to look at a continent for the first time? Do you think that this will be motivation enough for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And all of your viewers are going to be aware of the Africa Rising narrative over the last, say, 5-10 years. And in the last couple of years, there was a dent to that rising narrative. And one of the limitations, one of the challenges of that Africa Rising narrative is that it continued to paint the continent in one brush. And we all know that each market is very different. And not only that, but markets within a country are very different. Comparing Lagos and Maiduguri in Nigeria, it's not a one-to-one comparison. And for large multinationals that are interested in tapping into the next major growth market, which is the continent, the ability to have local geospatial data means that they can actually truly understand the opportunity. What's the prize, and not think about that opportunity at a continental level or even at a national level, but be able to focus in on cities or neighborhoods within cities as well as subregions. So we are finding, again, a lot of excitement and receptivity that these kinds of companies are able to truly understand where the potential lies and then figure out where to go based upon that. So I think this is going to be the future. I think you're going to see more and more companies that value geospatial data and incorporate it into their day-to-day decision-making. I think it's just where the markets are going, and we're happy to be a part of that.
Okay, Ben, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time today, for speaking to us. I've been speaking to you, Ben Leo, CEO of Fraym and former Director for African Affairs at the White House.